Johno from Rockdove Rising, which is a housing co-op and group in Hume, and trying to tackle some of the new housing issues that actually have arisen in Hume thanks to the new student builds and stuff there. And I'll let him talk about 5-8 minutes about how housing cooperatives can be a solution and what problems we face.
Yeah, hi. We got called into this because the position that we're currently in is similar to many people in Manchester. You know, we are finding ourselves unable to really afford to rent in this city. None of us are in a position to buy at all, really. I mean, not even within just this city. The crisis for us is expanding out. But in the cities we feel it the most because in some ways there's more people wanting to live here, and there's a lot of money being poured into the city, but not towards us. We live on the red bricks, and that is where our home is. It's our spiritual home as well. And as a community, we established ourselves in 2013, trying to set up a housing cooperative. In 2013, we were looking at buying our flat, a 3-bed flat, reasonable size, but you know, comfortable for us, for £75,000. Now in 2016, not too much further on, the house price is £140,000. So as anyone can work out, that has seen us almost double in price. And that is a situation which, as we speak to those around us, we can only see escalating and escalating and escalating. Why? Because on one side of us, we have a university, we have the Manchester Metropolitan buildings on Burley Fields, which again, we remember not too long ago when we were protesting to try and protect that land as well. But that has now been built on by the university, and with that we've seen an influx of students, which a lot of us were. I certainly was a student in Manchester. But what I suppose we see different in one sense is what that has done to our housing market. We've seen landlords over the years, people, not necessarily when we talk about landlords as if they're sort of like some kind of demon. These are ordinary people who bought multiple houses and found that they could subsidise their own living, the cost of living, by renting houses, and could build this cushion for themselves. And I find it kind of a strange situation because it feels like it's a generational thing in some ways. As I reflect on it, there was a generation of people who could buy more than one home. And they bought them, they've rented them, and the price on those just kept on going up as well when we were renting as students. When I graduated, I started squatting. I felt like it seemed like the option that was available to us, and it seemed like a movement. But slowly but surely that was clamped down on. And after spending a lot of time interacting with Europe, you know, mentioned Barcelona and Berlin, and travelling around Italy, we came back and we felt motivated to move into housing cooperatives. Well, why cooperatives? I think that our belief was that by collectivising and purchasing houses together and getting people to invest into cooperatives, we could provide an alternative, not just for ourselves, but as an alternative approach to living, something which was community-centred by its very nature. I'm not going to over-talk on cooperatives because I think that's going to come up later on, but we felt that it was going to be a community-centred approach, and we felt that it was still providing a platform whereby we didn't have to give our money to private landlords, which we objected to, and also where we could start to take control and autonomy over our own property. And that has remained our belief, even though we're finding ourselves being increasingly priced out of the market. That's partly because when I've looked at other cooperative models, and you know, again, we'll hear from other cooperatives, but often they've gone for this approach of buying a big house where you can get lots of people living in there. And it's nice shared living thing, but it has its limitations. And one of our interests was trying to provide homes, still within a cooperative model, where we would share responsibility and where we could support each other, but where we could also be in smaller contained units. We'd have 2-bed flats where couples could live, or young families starting up. We have a brand new family sort of living in one of our flats now, where I don't know where they would have been able to afford in their situation, not able to get much work around the city and trying to raise a family. We wanted to provide solutions to those people as well, but then also have opportunities for people to live in shared accommodations. So we've got a series of different flats on the red bricks, 3-bed, 2-bed. Now, the thing with the red bricks going there was our response to the loss then of social housing. And I think this is the main reason why we're here representing today, because as we live on the red bricks, and I've said about the university closing in on one side, and on the other side of us, we have the city sweeping in and squashing our set of social housing in the middle. And you've heard about the rise in prices. What that has meant is that tenants are being encouraged to activate the right to buy, and this is increasing, so that now that the red bricks, which was a completely social housing estate, one of the first in the country, established in the the 1940s, back when social housing was seen as a genuine social good rather than described by governments as a drain on their finances. Slowly but surely, we're now at 50% of our houses are privately owned, and that is escalating. What we are seeking to do is to start trying to buy property, sometimes primarily from people who have already activated the right to buy and who all of a sudden feel maybe a twang of guilt as they realise that they could be profiteering on the back of the loss of social housing. And what we're trying to do is to re-socialise this housing by not looking to governments to provide the funding, not looking to government, but and certainly not the housing associations. But what we feel is, I'm talking about the red bricks as if people know where it is. I hope most people do have opportunity to come and visit our estate, because it is a wonderful example of what community can bring to an inner city area. Okay, I'm getting told to wrap up. My point would be is that by cooperatising former social housing, what we're seeking to do is to provide a platform where we can extend and re-socialise housing, but providing autonomy for those who live there, and hopefully generate a new wave of social housing within the city. Sorry, is that enough?
Next we have Kai from the Burrow Housing Co-op. Kai's going to share with us just a few details of what it's like genuinely living in a housing co-op, for those of us who don't know, and the strengths and pitfalls, hopefully. Thanks.
Right, so I'm one of the other types of housing co-ops mentioned. We are a 13-bedroom building. It was previously a hostel which ran empty for many years, owned by the Salvation Army, who are not our friends, but we do have a leasehold from them. And we are 9 adults and 4 children. And, okay, I have to think of a structure that'll fit into 5 minutes. So I can talk about how basically being in this type of housing co-op has saved my life, figuratively and literally. We started out as a relatively small group of people so there's a small group of people about 7 years ago. I joined 4 years ago, who were living in student housing. It was falling apart, it was mouldy, it stank, people were getting ill, the landlady was completely taking the piss. And so some of the people who lived in that situation decided to get together, trying to work out some other situation. They came across the concept of housing co-ops, decided to start one. They gained a fairly large group. I joined that group, like I said, about 4 years ago when it was still relatively formative. And people have come and joined, people have dropped off. We acquired the house that we're in about a year ago. We were very, very lucky. There was a whole series of things where basically our stars aligned really well. I heard about this house that the Salvation Army were trying to get rid of from a mailing list that I happened to be on. We managed to have sort of the right people in our group who were able to take on like a year-long negotiation with the Salvation Army to get a situation that was affordable for us and we could manage. One of our members managed to inherited a small amount of money effectively, which we've used towards deposit and towards some repairs. We've been very, very fortunate. I'm also really interested in hearing what the other speaker was saying about the types of co-ops which have multiple buildings, because one of the drawbacks, obviously, with this situation is we've got 15 people living in 13 rooms, and it's 4 of them are kids, so we fit very well. But it's a very communal way of living, and for us that suits very, very well. That's been a very empowering situation. A lot of us are queer, some of us are disabled, we're quite neurodiverse, some of us are autistic, some of us are parents, so it's very useful for sort of parenting. One reason I'm here today is because of the amazing parenting support that I have. It means I can go to things like this because I've got so many people who've got my back in relation to looking after my kids. I do think it has limitations in as much as you have privacy because you have your own room, we each have our own room, and simultaneously I think there are going to be people obviously who want, their own kitchen, who want to raise a family not around lots of other people. So I think it's a limited solution. It'll apply well to some people, but there's definitely a lot of space for situations where you get multiple houses or flats or bungalows also. I'd quite like to talk actually later on, maybe with more people, about systems which involve multiple types of housing, because some are, to be honest, more profitable than others, and some are a lot more expensive than others. And it seems a shame that you end up with individuals or families taking on massive expense because of their situations being more expensive, and other people whose housing is very cheap, but then their landlord gets a load of profit. So I think if we could have more housing control where we basically help each other out, and you have the more profitable buildings, such as it is, subsidising the more expensive buildings so we all can have like a reasonable living situation, that would be really exciting. Basically the thing that makes our housing amazing is that we've saved each other from homelessness, we've saved each other from unemployment, we've saved each other from mental health breakdowns. If I don't have the physical or emotional energy to get the shopping in, somebody else does. If I struggle with looking after the kids, somebody else helps. We've actually got a member, and again this is very interesting, or I think it's quite an interesting kind of almost financial argument, if anything, for the housing co-op, where we had a member who for absolutely ages were paying no rent and no utilities because they had no income. So they lived with us anyway. We were fortunate that we could afford to subsidise them, but they lived with us anyway. They're an amazing member, it was very nice to have them. And then recently they've got a really well-paying job. So what they've been doing is just channeling lots of money into the housing co-op, because they're invested in it, they're emotionally invested in this group and in this situation doing well. And I think that's just a really good example of how it's, it is important. You do need to consider basically situations of whether it's realistic in any given situation. Like for a while, we were all renting, and it almost did look impossible. There was a long period of time where we looked at different buildings to try and buy one. And a lot of the advice given, we joined Radical Roots. Everyone heard of Radical Roots? It's like a network organisation. And some of the people in Radical Roots were very, very lovely, and it does a lot of good work as an organisation. The drawback we had was we were told as a group, to start to become a member as a group, you have to go to 4 meetings. They have meetings every 3 months. 2 of the annual meetings are in fields. The summer and spring meetings are in fields, so you have to physically be able to go out and camp and sit out in outdoor meetings. So that was awkward. There's a whole travel issue of getting around the country to these different meetings. And the advice we were given by Radical Roots was that we should fundraise, and that Radical Roots as an organisation can pay for half of our deposit if we fundraise the other half, which obviously we at the time couldn't afford, so we're very limited that way. So we're very, very fortunate. Basically, one of our members inherited some money. So I think the cooperative movement in the UK currently has issues with ableism and with patriarchal issues and with classism. And I think we can do a lot better, and I think my housing co-op is an example of people who are genuinely trying very hard. And there are radical roots co-ops who are trying very, very hard to overcome this. But it saved my life, literally and figuratively. So that's my introduction.